Good afternoon and welcome to Healthylicious Podcast. Today we're going to talk about something super interesting because it's all going to be regarding nutrition. So, what's more fun than having two dietitians together discussing all the topics and all the questions that you usually have? So let me introduce to you today Sedra. I'm very happy to have her with me today. She's also a nutritionist, dietitian, but she's also went into being a functional nutrition. She's going to tell you a little bit about what's the difference and what's about it and why she decided to go into this path. Let me welcome her today. Hi, Sidra.
Hi, Cynthia. How are you doing?
I'm very good. I'm very happy to have you with me today.
I'm really happy to be here. I'm excited for this talk.
There is a lot of questions that I have and lots of questions that usually clients ask us. And I think that what's better than, yourself to answer these questions, especially that you are into the functional nutrition path. So let's start by talking a little bit about yourself and about what is functional nutrition to explain what's the difference between conventional nutrition and functional nutrition.
Amazing. So I'm going to get started, I guess, by kind of letting you know how it all began, how kind of my path led me to go from more conventional dietetics and nutrition to all the way until functional nutrition and functional, my studies in that field. It all started actually in Montreal, Canada, in freezing cold Montreal. That's where I attended my bachelor's degree at McGill University. I completed a degree in nutritional sciences. I started taking plenty, of foundational courses in nutrition, very, very interesting. I started realizing that, I actually want to apply what I learned to really help support and empower people with nutrition. Nutrition is so imperative when it comes to, preventative, medicine, healing people, making sure that, you are so far away from all these chronic diseases. So I started realizing more and more that, we need more of it. And then I decided, okay, I did my bachelor's degree. I want to actually practice. So I've tried to follow more of the, dietetics route. I did a master's degree in dietetics. As part of my program as well at McGill, we have training across different hospitals. I was fortunate enough to get a placement in the Caribbean as well, which was so eye-opening. Got a chance to work in clinics in Barbados, where I got to deal with, patients of different conditions, whether it's diabetes, chronic obesity. And I started realizing this is my passion. This is what I really want to do. When I did graduate, I moved back home to Saudi. I started practicing in a private hospital. I started seeing, patients of different cases and conditions. And I started realizing that, people would come and see me. Their blood results would be normal, within normal ranges, but they would still feel like there's something off. They would still feel like, potentially they're not well. They either have gut issues, they're either bloated, they have chronic headaches, they get, sensitivities to foods, or they bloat after eating something specific. So there was always something off, despite the fact that the evidence or the lab data tells us that, ferritin is normal, cholesterol is fine. So what's the issue? That's when eventually around the time of COVID, I started digging deeper into culinary nutrition, which is really understanding the connection between, how food really interacts with our different bodily systems. And I started, pursuing some courses in that, started spending a lot of time in the kitchen. And I started realizing, the route to follow is really, more of the functional medicine, functional nutrition route, which is really personalized medicine, which is, looking more at the person that you are dealing with, at the patient, instead of just looking at the disease and just, treating the disease. You're treating an actual patient, an actual human. So that's really my journey. And at the moment, I'm practicing in clinical settings. So I do a lot of, functional medicine when it comes to my techniques and approaches in a holistic manner. So I obviously consider that, it's much more than just nutrition. It's also lifestyle. It's also, people that deal with stress. So it's kind of encompassing everything to really help treat and empower the patient. So that's my journey.
So it's a holistic approach. And that is, I think this is the future. Future of nutrition, future of medicine. Now we rely a lot on old, things like, for example, ancient Chinese medicine, Indian medicine, Indian oils, Ayurveda.
Definitely.
Lots of things that will help us.
Herbs and spices.
And and I believe it's beautiful. So let me ask you this question. What do you think is the best diet? So what's the best diet? This is a question that everybody asks. So what's the best diet to follow?
This is a very common question. You as a dietitian, I'm sure you get that asked so frequently at the clinic, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So really the answer to this question is that there is no best diet, unfortunately. The best diet to follow is the best diet that is suitable for you. And this is, again, going back to the concept of, functional nutrition and functional medicine. It's really based on your biochemical individuality. As humans, we're all biochemically, different. The stresses that I go through in life are so different than yours. My lifestyle, my environment, the way I grew up, my taste preferences. Lots of studies are also published to tell you that, the way you were born, whether you were born through normal delivery, through a C-section, can really also impact your biochemical individuality and your gut microbes, which are so important to really, consider all of these things and understand that it's a very tailored approach. There's no one size fits all. So, when you scroll on social media and you hear stories from people telling you, this is the best diet, it might be for that particular person, but it might not work for you. That's when you really need to seek support from, a health practitioner, get a tailored protocol that is suitable for you based on tests that you do. There's a lot of amazing functional testing that exists out there, whether it's, stool testing, urine testing, saliva testing that you can do to really help support and get so many answers that, you're unsure about when it comes to your overall health. So there is no best diet to follow. That's really the answer to it.
I believe the same way. It's very personalized, and that's why it's by trial and error. And that's why the way I see things, I believe you do the same, is we start with a general idea, general approach. Like we should not stop completely a certain nutrient or macronutrient just because, my friend did it and it helps. We have to do the tests, we have to see the person, we have to try.
100%.
And then this is why it's a long journey. Being with a dietitian is a long journey. It's not just like one time and then, we don't see the patient anymore.
Definitely.
Okay, so let me ask you, you talked a little bit about gut health.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me a little bit, like, why do people bloat a lot today? Like, what are the main things that we should remove from the diet or regarding bloating and regarding as well a little bit about gut health?
Very good question. So I don't know, as a dietitian, I'm sure you've been noticing that more and more over the past couple of years, almost I'm not going to say every single person, but a lot of people that come and see you struggle more or less with a gut-related issue.
Yes.
It's becoming very common, and we're getting so many question marks as to why that is. And this, again, stems back into our gut health. Our gut health is really the foundation to, overall health. It all starts at the level of the gut. This is why when we do and practice functional nutrition and functional medicine, the starting point is always looking at the gut, better understanding the gut, and probing the patient and asking them questions to better understand what's going on at the level of the gut.
Okay.
So really that's the start of it. And I believe what's so magnificent about the human body is we have these creatures living in our guts. So it is studied and it's mentioned in a lot of papers that we have over 100 trillion of these creatures or these microorganisms that make up over 1,000 species. So in this 9-meter gastrointestinal tract that we have, you can imagine we have all these different creatures lying there, interacting, actively there. And it's been said that this is more biodiversity than actually a rainforest.
Wow.
So as you can imagine, the bacterial composition that's in my gut right now is totally different and totally unique to, for example, what you might have at the level of your gut. And this is stemming back into the idea that we're all biochemically unique and biochemically different. Okay. Now, going back to bloating, it all stems back to, microbial balance. How much of the good versus how much of the bad do you have?
Okay.
Are things in balance when it comes to your gut health? Are things, not in balance? Are you in dysbiosis? So what that means is, do you have more of the bad versus the good? And when that happens, naturally, you tend to have chronic bloating. So no matter what you eat, you tend to feel bloated, uncomfortable after the meal. You can be very gassy, and there's a slur of GI issues that can happen. So generally, what can you do? Obviously, there's tailored protocol for this. Every single person, has specific recommendations that might suit them, that might not suit other people. But in general, there are certain recommendations that, we try to encourage people to start with as a means of supporting their gut. The first one obviously being really focusing on, the right types of fibers that you introduce at the level of your gut. Introducing plenty of, soluble fibers is a great way to start, but doing so in a gradual way. Again, not to overwhelm the gut. So whether we're talking, different types of vegetables, flax seeds, chia seeds, a great way to start. You obviously have your bitter greens or your bitter leaves, watercress, things like endives, kale, dandelion. A lot of studies are being published about their amazing benefits to really stimulate digestive juices at the level of the gut. You obviously have different types of minerals and vitamins that are so essential for gut health, magnesium being an essential one for that gut lining. So introducing things like pumpkin seeds, for example, is so good because you're introducing more magnesium in your diet and you're supporting that gut lining. Zinc is another one that's been shown to really stimulate gastric acid secretion. So zinc is an excellent one. You have things like collagen, for example. More and more people are, learning about the amazing benefits of bone broth, for instance, which is a great source of collagen. So that can be also a great way to start healing your guts. Vitamin C supports the synthesis of collagen. So that's another way, introducing vitamin C rich foods like berries, for instance, is a great way to support that. So again, I can go on and on about, recommendations, but there are definitely certain things that we need to consider. There's also L-glutamine, for instance. Plenty keep popping up in my mind right now. But there's a lot of things that, can be introduced to really support that gut lining and minimize what we call intestinal permeability, which is basically when things can pass through easily in that gut lining when they shouldn't be passing through, causing a slur of things like bloating, for instance. Yeah.
And since you're talking about this, like bad habits, for example, such as eating fast food, eating processed food, does it also affect the gut?
100%. So that's when you're talking about things like, your processed oils, your refined oils, hydrogenated oils, canola, sunflower, vegetable oils, margarine, all of these things that we find in a lot of fast foods based dishes. Again, they can really impact the gut. There's also things like over-abusing, antibiotics, anti-inflammatory medications as well. People that, go overboard with painkillers that can really start affecting the gut lining. And that's when you have these spaces in the gut lining, creating a state of what we call leaky gut.
Yeah.
So there's definitely stuff that we need to consider, in terms of what we're putting in our diet, in our day-to-day eating regimen. And reading food labels is a great way to start, by the way. I'm sure as a dietitian, you educate your patients a lot on, how they should be checking labels, what they should look for in ingredients, things like that.
Since you're talking about oils, I have two questions for you. First, can you tell us a little bit, if you talk about, when you talk to your clients, what's the best fats or oils that they can use in their diet? In cooking or, in general, like what's the oils? And also I wanted to ask your advice about, green juice, because there's a lot of vegetables that you mentioned that are present in a lot of green juices, right? So let's start with the oils. What do you think is the best oil or fat to have?
Very good question. So as a starting point, again, there exist different types of oils, but I would say, again, starting with a good quality, cold pressed, extra virgin olive oil, loaded with monounsaturated fats, antioxidant properties is a great way to start. Thing with olive oil is cooking, if you're cooking at medium heat temperatures, it's a good oil to use. If you're looking more to cook at higher temperatures, I would definitely say avocado oil is a great one to, if you're making stir-fried based dishes, if you want to cook something at a high temperature. And you have coconut oil. Coconut oil has what we call medium chain triglycerides, which are broken down types of fats, and it's an excellent fat for our gut health as well. So these would be my top 3 choices. And then the ones I would avoid would be the ones I stated previously, like all these processed
That's beautiful, and especially that the listener or people who are watching us today, it's very important to know that the heating point of the oil is important, and that's why at home, if they would like to use it with a bit more temperature, then avocado oil would be better than olive oil.
100%.
Right? Okay. And what do you think about green juices?
Green juices.
It's a big question, but maybe you can give guidelines.
Okay. In what concept? In the sense that people use them more as, I guess, cleanses, or in what sense?
I would say like within a healthy diet. Let's
Within a
say
healthy
in the
diet.
morning, or the first thing they drink will be like, a green juice, because
Yeah.
they will have inside all the vegetables that you
Yeah.
mentioned. But let's give them guidelines about what's good in it and what can be bad, especially the sugar or whatever they
Yeah,
add
very good
inside.
question. So green juices are, I think, a great kind of convenient way to introduce definitely more fiber in your diet. Sometimes people, can't ensure that they're eating, all the vegetables that they need throughout the day. So just, popping them in a mixer or, pressing them is a great way to get a lot of the benefits. But what happens as well is, when you add things in a mixer, you're also getting rid of some of the fiber versus eating the complete whole food within itself.
Yeah.
You're missing out on some of the fiber in that sense. Again, it really depends on a person's lifestyle. Basing yourself solely on green juices is not, again, my favorite approach. But they're a great, phytonutrient-packed juice to introduce as a means of, convenience and as a way to get in a lot of nutrition as well. So they are great.
Beautiful. So let's talk a little bit more about the gut, because it's a really important topic. What about the gut-brain barrier? They talk a lot about the relationship between the gut and the brain. Tell us a little bit about that.
Amazing. So many different studies have been published to date to tell us that there is, actually a connection between our brain and our gut. And this connection is actually called the vagus nerve, interestingly enough. So the vagus nerve is really what connects your brain to your gut. It's a bidirectional relationship, as you stated. And what's very interesting is because there exists that bidirectional relationship, whatever is happening at the level of your gut is likely going to influence your mental state. Okay. And studies have been published showing that people that have, chronic depression, anxiety, and stress, when they actually, looked into their microbiome and the composition of their gut, they saw certain strains that were not there in certain people that, didn't have depression or anxiety. So it's very interesting how there's that bidirectional relationship. And, as humans, we have neurotransmitters, or these chemicals that the brain needs to dictate things like our mood or our appetite. And some of these neurotransmitters or these chemicals actually stem or are produced at the level of the gut. A classic example, I'm sure you know, is serotonin. Over 80% of our serotonin is actually produced at the level of our gut.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine, if these microbes are not optimized, they're not being fed the right way, they're not being given, the right types of foods to really help them flourish and thrive, then how do you expect us to feel our very best? How do you expect us to be producing that serotonin in the right amounts, and hence, avoiding things like depression, anxiety, and stress? So it's interesting. There's like that link and that bidirectional relationship that
and
is
I think a simple way to see it is when you're stressed, you have pain in your stomach.
Yes.
Sometimes you have like discomfort, or you have
Yes.
diarrhea, or you have pain, right?
Yeah.
So this is something that will show you that it's real. Like
Definitely.
the brain is related to the gut, right?
Definitely. They call the gut the second brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They call it the second
Yeah.
brain. So since we're talking about that, can you give us also a question I always have is what's prebiotics and probiotics? So let's simplify it and explain what's the difference and why, having them together is also very important.
Very good question. So your probiotics, in a nutshell, are basically your foods that contain beneficial bacteria for your gut health, okay? These are things, for instance, like, different types of fermented vegetables, kimchi, sauerkraut, things like kombucha, fermented beverages, kefir. They're excellent, for populating the bacteria at the level of your gut. And then you have your prebiotics, which are basically food for those bacteria.
Okay.
So this can be things like foods that are very high in fiber, artichokes, asparagus, berries, different types of beans, chickpeas, lentils, etc. So that's in a nutshell what these two basically terms relate to. And we need both probiotics and prebiotics to really help, that intestinal lining that I was talking about, to really help our gut microbiome and to help our gut health thrive.
Okay, beautiful. So what do you think, since we're talking about gut health, about, having the good bacteria in the gut, what do you think about detox? Detox is a big word, right?
Yes.
Everybody see it differently.
Yeah.
And we always have questions in Healthylicious, like, do you have a detox plan? Since now I don't believe in it and I don't have we haven't created a detox plan because for me, detox is a very big word, and I try to explain it. So let me ask you, what's your advice about detox?
Yeah.
How can you detoxify?
Speaking
our
about
body?
the Healthylicious meal plan, I just want to let you know, I've actually been on the plan several times.
Yeah.
I have, like, any other person, despite the fact that I'm a dietitian, I have months where I'm very busy. I don't have time to prepare my meals. So it's been really convenient to select my options on the website, to select the types of foods I want. Everything's macro and calorie counted, and it's been great. I get, the cooler delivered every morning, and it's been going really well. So I did try the meal plan, and I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you, especially that you're a dietitian and you're always been coming, and during Ramadan and then during the summer, and then
It's out of
it's always
convenience.
good to have you because you trust us and that you're like
Thank
food.
you. So going back to the word detox.
Yeah.
So detox is actually a buzzword. We hear it so much on social media. I started this cleanse. I did this water fast. I did this juice fast, So people get carried away with what detox is or detoxification is. But detoxification, and I'm sure you know this as a dietitian, is a natural process that happens in every person's body.
Yeah.
Okay. And the master detox organ is actually the liver. We definitely have other organs that support detoxification, whether we're talking about, the gastrointestinal mucosa, the skin, the lungs, the kidneys, they all support detoxification. The liver is the main one. And in essence, any molecule that comes into our body, whether it's a food, a drink, a medication, has to be detoxified.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's a natural process that happens. And just to dig deeper a bit into the science, detoxification actually happens in two phases.
Okay.
You have phase 1 and phase 2. Okay? Phase 1 is actually the phase that you have this toxin that comes in. The body identifies it, as a toxin. It comes in into the liver. And the liver actually tries to process it in a way through the support of different vitamins and minerals. That's where nutrition plays a big role. Converts it into actually a product that is even more toxic. So it comes in as a fat-soluble molecule. And then basically for it to be excreted out of the body the right way through bile or through urine, it needs to be made into a water-soluble molecule. So that's when, you have things like conjugates, nutrients, vitamins, and minerals that play a part. Glutathione is a big one, a very buzzing one that we've been hearing a lot about on social media to help support liver detoxification. So it basically happens in two phases. Okay. The idea that, we're going on detox cleanses really, it's a myth. We don't have these detox cleanses. It's naturally how you support your body with the right nutrition, with the right or key minerals and vitamins to really help you optimize this detox that naturally happens, by the way, in any person's body. Okay. So going on these lengthy fasts actually is gonna make things a bit more of a burden for your liver. Mm-hmm. Why? Because when you are doing these cleanses, you're likely starving your body of, very important vitamins and minerals. So what your liver is gonna respond to, it's gonna be alerted. It's gonna be like, okay, I'm not getting enough nutrition. I need to seek energy from fat cells. Mm-hmm. So it's gonna go into your adipocytes or your fat cells. It's going to release some fats. With that, you're going to have some toxins that are going to be released, and that's going to put an additional burden on the liver. So really the best way to do it is optimize your nutrition. That's really, the most important thing to emphasize when it comes to cleanses.
It's really beautiful how it always go back to what you eat and how you eat it and your nutrition and 100%. Eating a variety of food. That's why also, when on our meal plan, we have every day a vegetarian dish. And I'm super happy because of this. And I always tell our clients, try to choose vegetarian dishes. Yes. Because you need, these beans, you need these, burghols, these whole grains. Yeah. They're excellent for your gut. Don't always go for the chicken and the beef, and the seafood. Always go for vegetarian dishes.
100%.
They're really
plant-based.
Important.
Yeah.
So what are, if we talk about, since we're talking about detoxification and helping, the liver, what's the main vitamins we should look for?
Okay, a very good question. So first of all, a big one, a very important mineral, which I keep mentioning, if you notice, in different systems of the body, is magnesium. Okay. It's so important because it's going to support, things like your phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. So magnesium is a key one. You have things like zinc. You have iron, which supports something called cytochrome P450, which happens in phase 1 of liver detoxification.
Okay.
So that's a big one. And you have key amino acids, which are what we call your sulfur-containing amino acids, methionine, cysteine, taurine, which come in high-quality proteins like eggs, lean meats or lean poultry.
Okay.
So these are some things to consider when it comes to supporting your liver health. Really digging deep to understand that there are certain, minerals that need to be there as part of your day-to-day eating regimen to really help support natural detoxification.
Okay, beautiful. So you don't always support it with supplements. You can support it only with nutrition, right?
Definitely. No, it really depends actually.
Okay.
Starting off, I'm that dietitian that tells you always food first. But unfortunately, in today's world, you can't guarantee that you're getting all the nutrients you need just by your, meals that you have on a day-to-day basis. A lot of actually our food has been modified, unfortunately. Changes in the soil, changes in farming practices. So a lot of our food actually has been depleted of so many key nutrients nowadays. So sometimes supplementation is just there as a boost. It's there to supplement your current diet. So I'm a believer that, with diet comes also supplementation. Supplementation plays a big role.
Okay, we haven't talked yet about blood sugar. Okay, what do you think can help or with nutrition? What do you guide your clients to help boost or help them with a good glucose control?
Okay, very good question. So when it comes to blood sugar is so key because when you have people that have imbalances in their blood sugar levels, you notice that they struggle from so many different, symptoms. Things like sugar cravings, things like inappropriate sleep. They wake up in the middle of the night because, they have things like insulin resistance. They can have things like high triglyceride levels, high inflammatory markers as well. So it's a slur of things that can happen, eventually leading to things like metabolic syndrome. So making sure that you have the appropriate balance of blood sugar is so key. And some things you can do from a nutrition perspective, obviously, is really thinking about how you can put a meal together to really make sure that you are able to avoid very rapid spikes in your blood sugar, followed by very rapid drops. So you're looking really into foods that can really help support blood sugar control. And it's the idea of choosing more or less the low glycemic types of foods, supporting, your eating habits with those types of foods, but also comes other types of things, making sure you're getting enough of the healthy fats, for instance, or essential fatty acids like omega-3 is there to really help, support and balance blood sugar levels, making sure you're getting enough protein as well. Protein is really what's going to fill you up at the level of your gut. It's going to, prolong the time that you need to grab another snack or grab another food item. Obviously plenty of vegetables because of the fiber content that they contain. So there are definitely different things that we need to consider. And I'm sure as a dietitian, on a day-to-day basis, you teach people how to create balanced meals. And it's all about the different components in the right proportions that we need to think about when it comes to blood sugar balance.
Yes, 100%. We didn't talk about weight loss, okay? What's your approach? What do you think is the best things we have to look for or, we have to modify in our lifestyle or work on in order to lose weight?
Very good question. This is
the question
that every single dietitian gets, whether she's out at dinner or she's always going to get asked that question. Yeah. So when it comes to weight loss, the interesting thing is people always think, okay, fats, we should stay away from fats. Fats are the enemy. They're always labeled as the bad guys. But in essence, the idea of losing weight successfully stems from hormonal balance. So when you think hormones, I always like to think, fats. I always like to think, getting your healthy fats. And healthy fats are really the basis of producing adequate amounts of hormones and the right types of hormones. So you need to make sure things like cortisol, insulin, melatonin, the hormone responsible for your, circadian rhythm, insulin, for metabolism, thyroid hormones as well. So really making sure you're getting your essential fats, omega-3 fats. These are essential because your body cannot produce them naturally. So you need support from the diet, getting them from fatty fish, salmon, sardines, tuna, trout, mackerel, but also getting a good ratio of your omega-6s as well, which are another type of essential fatty acids, and making sure, obviously, that you're getting in enough fiber, phytonutrients, which are all these good plant chemicals that you get from your vegetables. So there's different things to consider. And also from a lifestyle perspective, managing stress, making sure, you are, if you're someone that drinks alcohol, making sure that it's, consumed within moderation. All of these things can put a burden on, weight management. And weight management, as we were talking about before the start of this podcast, is a journey. It has its ups and downs. When you see a dietitian, it's not always going to be a straight line. So we need to understand this, and we need to understand that there's so many different factors that also take part in this. It's lifestyle, but also a big part is nutrition.
True. How about exercise in all of this? Do you recommend any type of exercise depending on the person, lifestyle or person's weight or medical condition?
It's very personalized, again, I would say. It really depends on where the person's at in terms of their mindset. Some people that come and see me have not exercised for years. So you cannot expect that person is actually, you're going to give him a protocol. You're going to tell him, listen, I need you to start exercising 3 times a week. You can't expect that someone is going to go from 0 to 100 real quick like that. You know what I mean? It's baby steps. So really, again, it's going back to a tailored approach. Start by doing what you enjoy. That's a great way to, being consistent with at least movement, and then build it up gradually. That's really the best tip of advice I can give when it comes to exercising. For people that don't do, much exercising, they don't go to the gym, even getting some steps in has been proven through research to really have amazing benefits on, different systems in the body, one of which being blood sugar control and blood sugar balance. So it really depends. Again, it's very personalized.
Sedra, you know that I work in a gastro clinic, and we have lots of clients or patients who come with gastric issues, and they ask about the food intolerance test. What do you think about food sensitivities and food intolerance tests?
Okay. Very good question. So generally, again, someone that follows a more functional route, as functional nutritionists, we always tailor our protocols based on a 5R protocol.
Okay.
We call it the 5R approach. Okay, so what that means is we first of all look at the types of foods we need to be removing from the patient's current diet, whether it's alcohol, whether it's certain, overabuse of certain medications, anti-inflammatory medications, for instance, certain foods that are causing sensitivities or intolerances. Secondly, when we've, removed these types of foods, we replace them with the right types of foods. So that's where we introduce, healthy eating habits, healthy regimens, things like soluble fibers. Then we repopulate the gut. That's the 3rd R, repopulating with the right types of bacteria. And the way we do that is, with our probiotics and our prebiotics that I was talking about. So that's the 3rd R. The 4th R is repairing. So you need to repair the gut lining, like I was talking about, by supporting it with different types of, micronutrients, different vitamins and different minerals. And lastly, rebalancing. Rebalancing when it comes to stress management, anything that is, more in the lifestyle that could be affecting gut health, we try and support our patient by rebalancing that. Okay. Now, you asked specifically about food intolerance testing. So where does that fall into all of that? Definitely, they do play a role in helping us dig deeper and helping us, better understand what's going on, especially if someone comes to your clinic and tells you, listen, anything I eat is causing me to bloat. I'm not sure where to start. If they would like, we can start by doing a food intolerance test. Generally, this is a report that we receive from the lab with, different color-coded markings of, different foods that could be causing a bit more intolerance versus others. I normally, as a dietitian, if I see that there's a lot of foods that are listed that the patient is intolerant to, I like to look at the first 10 I like to do an elimination diet. I put the patient on an elimination diet. We eliminate these foods, for a couple of weeks and reintroduce them one by one gradually to see how the patient is tolerating this whole removal of the foods and reintroduction. So they do play a role in helping us support gut health, but sometimes people just do them for the sake of doing them and they're not needed. I say really speak to a health practitioner before you want to conduct a food intolerance test to see if it's a test that's suitable to you. So it really depends.
Exactly, because some people think that it's for weight loss.
Yes.
Some people think that it's going to be the food that if I remove from my diet, I'm going to lose weight, which is not the case. Sometimes you don't have gluten, sometimes you don't have dairy, sometimes you have just some small things that you might be intolerant to,
100%.
Right? Yeah.
I always like to tell people they're a snapshot of what's happening at the moment at the level of your gut.
Yes.
But 2 years down the line, what you might have been intolerant to is not necessarily what you're intolerant to right now.
Yes.
Because the gut is ever evolving, right? We have these microorganisms that I talked about that are constantly changing and their distribution composition is changing. So we need to make sure that we don't become too restrictive and we use it more as a tool to guide us as to where we are at the moment in terms of gut health.
We didn't talk about sugar. What's your input about sugar in general? Would you cut it completely from the diet? Would you give certain types of sugar, or it depends?
Okay. So again, as a dietitian, I'm a believer that every nutrient plays a role in the body. So cutting down sugar completely, again, is not really the way to do it. Again, we know that not all sugars are created equally. Again, if you're talking complex carbohydrates versus simple sugars, they have different impacts on how they're going to raise your blood sugar and thereby your insulin levels. So it really depends. But again, it depends on the amounts that you're consuming. If you want to enjoy some, rice with your meal, that's not going to necessarily be a bad thing. That's actually going to be part of a balanced meal if you're consuming it with adequate amounts of proteins and healthy fats on the side as well. So it really depends on, how you're balancing sugars or carbs and how you're eating them with other types of foods.
And what do you think about simple sugars? Would you stop completely, like white sugar, and go for more different types of sugar?
Okay, so there's definitely alternatives. Sometimes people, when they're baking, instead of just using white sugar, they opt for things like maple syrup, honey. In the end, what I want to highlight is all sugar in the end is metabolized in one way. Sugar is sugar in the end in that sense.
Yes.
So when it comes to simple sugars, always keep in mind that moderation is key. Enjoy them within moderation. So be aware of how much you are adding to your recipes and how much you're consuming them. And always check food labels. Really, really important, because what's happening is that manufacturers often, they label sugar in other words. So sometimes consumers are misled into believing, okay, this product has no added sugars, but then when you look at the label, it does actually have sugars from different types of sources. You know what I mean? So it's all about kind of staying informed and kind of making those connections as well. That's so important.
Beautiful. I want to end with something very important, calories.
Okay.
When you talked about weight loss, you didn't mention at all the word calories. What do you think? You don't put your client or your patient into calorie deficit in order to lose weight? What's your approach?
Very good question. So definitely calories do play a role. As dietitians, when we go to university, we learn all these equations to help, calculate things like the BMR of a patient and things like that. So calories are definitely there. They play a big role. Putting someone on a calorie deficit naturally is gonna, cause them to lose weight, but that's only part of the picture. It's not the full kind of mosaic. Calories are just, partly part of the picture. We need to consider ingredients as well. What are the types of nutrients that you're putting into your body? I could have something 200 calories versus another thing that's 200 calories, but that other thing that you're having could be so nutrient dense, and you could be getting in, much more nutrition versus that other thing 100%. That's just equally in terms of caloric content. You know what I mean? So these are just some things that I really want people to kind of open their minds about, in that sense, that it's not only calories. Calories definitely play a part in the equation, but it's also a bit, more than that we need to consider.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sedra. Is there anything else you would like to say before we end?
I really enjoyed giving this talk and just chatting with you and just, going through commonly asked questions as dietitians that we get. I just want to mention, people really need to make sure that, when they're struggling with something, always make sure to link it back to your gut health. Okay. It's really the foundation. This is kind of the wrap-up message of the session. Really link it back to your gut, see what's happening at the level of the gut. And if you need to seek support, go see a health care professional to really get the most out of testing that you can do and supports, because it's a very tailored and personalized approach.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sedra.
Thank
you everybody for watching. And so very happy to have given this talk today. And next time with a new topic with the Healthylicious Podcast.